We're starting this deep dive today with a really big concept, maybe one of the most powerful ideas we all grapple with: freedom.
Mm,
And if you stop for a second, and just picture what freedom looks like, chances are you're thinking about independence.
right. Self-reliance.
Exactly. The absence of constraints, the ability to just act alone without needing anyone else.
And that mental model, that freedom equals being left alone, well, that's an incredibly strong human intuition. It's so powerful.
It really is. We see it everywhere.
It governs how we think about it. Everything from, quitting a job to moving off grid. We're always seeking that low interdependence zone.
And that's precisely what our sources today are pushing back against. We have this fascinating set of materials that make a structural argument. They say that true functional freedom,
The kind that actually creates prosperity.
yeah, the kind that lets you achieve big, coherent goals. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't grow in a vacuum. It only grows inside a strong, aligned structure.
And this whole paradox really comes to life in a very specific place.
Hmm.
The sources take us on a road trip, basically, through northern Israel to a place called Diganya,
The first kibbutz.
the very first kibbutz. And by looking at its history, we can start to see how organizational structure either locks us into stagnation or, well, explodes our collective capability.
So that's our mission today. We want to unpack this tension for you. Why does acting alone feel like freedom, but historically it just led to stagnation? And why did these structures that demanded tight coordination, like a kibbutz or even a modern company, generate so much more capability?
To even begin to answer that, we have to make a pretty fundamental shift in our thinking. We have to stop treating freedom as just an emotional state, a feeling,
And start treating it as what?
as a structural property of a system. The real measure, the functional measure of freedom is actually pretty simple. What's the actual range of coherent possibilities available to the people inside that system?
Okay, so let's start with that historical lens then. The sources detail this journey, this drive around the Sea of Galilee, where this massive contrast just smacks you in the face.
It really does. What you're seeing there is the long-term result of what we can call low complexity structures.
Like the ancient villages along the road.
Exactly. I mean, it's remarkable. Structurally, they were basically the same for 12,000 years. Their whole design was just about survival.
So cooperation didn't really go beyond the family unit.
Barely.
Yeah.
It was all about stability, about continuity. And that structure just completely stalled any real development.
And the sources say the nearby city, Old Tiberias, wasn't much better, structurally speaking.
No, by the early 20th century, it was basically just an oversized village. It was all household production, informal relationships. It survived, sure, but it had none of the organizational complexity, the companies, the institutions that you need for real economic progress.
You need that to build collective capability.
You do. And the historical reality is just, it's stark.
Yeah.
Those low interdependence structures, they produced almost no progress beyond just staying alive.
But wait a minute, this is where I still get stuck. If everyone in that village or that city had the freedom to control their own day, their own work, isn't that the purest kind of freedom?
It feels like it should be.
Yeah. So where's the breakdown? Why did all that individual control lead to, well, almost nothing?
Because functional freedom isn't really about control, it's about capability. That individual autonomy, it preserves stability for the one person, but it lacked coherence for the group.
Coherent?
Yeah. When your cooperation stops at your front door, you can't build a university. You can't finance a big irrigation project. You certainly can't invent something that takes decades of coordinated effort. That intuitive freedom was just a recipe for standing still.
And then you get Degania, founded in 1910.
A complete contrast.
The kibbutz required absolute interdependence. Total alignment, shared purpose, everything was communal. It was structurally complex from the very first day.
Exactly. And that new cooperative structure, it was designed to do one thing: accumulate collective capability,
Yeah.
and fast. It was built to break that historical mold of just preserving.
And it worked. The capabilities it generated spilled out far beyond its own borders.
It drove change across the entire country. So the big insight here is that the structures that actually broke that long stagnation, they required tighter alignment. Independence without structure just isn't enough. It lacks the coherence you need for any kind of meaningful, large-scale outcome.
And this isn't just about Israeli history, right? The sources say this is a universal law.
It's a universal law of increasing complexity. We can actually connect this right back to basic physics to understand why structure isn't the enemy of freedom, but actually the source of it.
Okay, we definitely need to slow down here because this is where it gets really counterintuitive for a lot of people. The analogy of the atom. How does chemistry explain this?
Well, think about an isolated atom.
Yeah.
On its own, it's highly autonomous, right? But it has very, very few stable possibilities. To stay stable on its own, say like a noble gas, it has to use energy to avoid interacting with anything. Its range of coherent action is tiny.
Minimal stability, minimal possibility. Got it.
Precisely. Now, put that same atom inside a complex molecule, like water or glucose. The atom doesn't lose its identity, but the structure of the molecule stabilizes its relationships with all the other atoms.
So the relationships become predictable.
They become stable, and because of that stability, the atom suddenly gains access to this exponentially wider range of states and interactions.
And?
It can participate in life itself.
So the structure is a platform. Complexity expands the number of coherent things you can do. It stabilizes the relationship between the parts.
That's the key. And that allows for these higher-level interactions that just could not happen if all the parts were floating around on their own.
And this pattern is universal.
It's everywhere. Atoms, cells, human beings.
Yeah.
Every time you increase complexity in a stable way, you expand the range of meaningful options available. Which brings us right back to that psychological trap we started with.
The intuitive search for freedom.
Yes. Most people intuitively seek freedom in what you could call the bottom left corner of a graph.
Okay, what's on the axis of this graph?
Imagine complexity on the vertical axis and interdependency on the horizontal. The bottom left is low complexity, low interdependency. The question people ask there is, where can I be left alone?
And that position offers the least capability.
At the very least. It's a narrow and, frankly, a lonely kind of freedom.
So to get the most functional freedom, the most meaningful choices, you have to go to the top right corner where complexity and interdependency are greatest.
You have to ask a different question. What must I do to gain the greatest ability to influence my environment? And the answer is, you have to seek high complexity.
But that still feels risky. Why doesn't that just feel like losing yourself in the group?
Because a well-aligned structure transforms interdependence from a constraint into coordination. A system with high coherence is always far more capable than the sum of its parts. Structure doesn't narrow freedom, it multiplies it. It gives you the power to build a molecule instead of just being an inert gas.
And to get that kind of coherence in a human system, you need alignment. This brings us to the most powerful framework in this deep dive, the 4 invisible forces that bind human organizations.
The sources map them to the 4 fundamental forces of physics. They call them mission, vision, values, and purpose. MVVP.
Okay, this is critical. Let's break them down. Mission is the first one, and it's compared to the
strong nuclear force.
which holds the nucleus of an atom together. It's short range, but incredibly powerful.
Right, and mission is just like that. It's high intensity, it's the here and now. It defines your daily operational actions. If your team doesn't have a clear mission, it will just fragment under pressure.
Can you give me a really clear example of a mission acting like that nuclear glue?
Think about a disaster relief team in the first 48 hours of a crisis. Their mission is brutally simple. Get this aid to that village before the road washes out.
Everything else is secondary.
Everything. That intense, short-range focus binds them completely. It lets them act with incredible, coordinated speed.
Okay, next up is vision, mapped to the electromagnetic force.
Right. The electromagnetic force governs how atoms bond into molecules. It's medium range. Vision is your medium-range orientation. It organizes all those relationships toward a shared horizon, moving you beyond just the immediate task.
So if the mission is get the food there today, the vision is?
The vision might be to establish self-sustaining infrastructure in this region within 3 years. It's still concrete enough to guide strategy and resource allocation, but it's looking further down the road than the daily task.
Let's move to values. This one feels a bit more abstract. It's mapped to the weak nuclear force.
And the weak force is subtle. It governs things like radioactive decay, internal transformations that let systems adapt without just falling apart. Values do the same thing for us. They regulate our fine-scale behavior. They stabilize the group as things change.
So values determine how we treat each other when things go wrong.
Exactly. How you handle conflict, how you react to failure, how you adapt to new information.
Okay, give me a concrete example of that fine-scale regulation.
Imagine a software team on a tight deadline, and a critical bug appears. Their stated value is radical transparency. The weak force, that value, determines what happens when a junior developer admits they caused the bug. If the value is weak, the team blames and isolates them. If the value is strong, they praise the honesty and everyone throws the problem together. The values stabilize the system during a moment of internal stress.
And the sources are really clear that you can't just write these on a wall. They have to be lived.
Absolutely. They're experiential, they're subtle, but they determine whether your system can evolve or just breaks.
And finally, purpose. This is the big one, gravity.
Gravity is the weakest force up close, but it's the only one that works over vast distances to hold galaxies together. Purpose is that long-range alignment. It's the why that provides meaning across generations long after any single leader or product is gone.
And the framework's main point is that all four of these have to be aligned. A strong mission with a weak purpose is motion without direction.
You'll be very busy going nowhere. High-capability systems don't just have these four forces, they synchronize them. That allows the structure to hold together and accumulate capability over decades.
Okay, so let's use this MVVP framework to go back to those historical examples. Why did the traditional village stagnate?
Its mission was just subsistence, and its purpose was only continuity survive for the next generation. The binding forces were narrow, unaligned. They were stuck forever in that bottom left corner of the graph.
And the ancient city. It was active but incoherent.
Exactly. It was just a big container full of separate private missions. Its purpose dissolved into simple coexistence, not collective advancement. It generated a lot of activity, but it couldn't convert any of it into cumulative progress.
Now, what about the modern limited liability company? It seems to do mission and vision really well.
It does. They're often formalized, explicit.
Yeah.
And they can accumulate capability very, very quickly. But the sources point out this incredible statistic. 90% of companies from a century ago are gone.
Why such a high failure rate?
Because the LLC's binding forces are usually anchored in the market. Its purpose, at the end of the day, is usually shareholder value or market success. And when the market shifts, that purpose isn't strong enough. The gravity isn't there to hold the structure together over generations.
Which brings us back to the kibbutz. Over 90% of them are still active. That's an incredible resilience.
Because their structure was built for endurance. They synchronized all four forces with incredible intensity. Mission was concrete production. Vision was tied to national renewal. Values were lived and reinforced every single day, that strong, weak force.
And their purpose.
Crucially, their purpose was oriented toward service to others, not just their own survival. That gave them a gravitational pull that transcended market cycles or political changes.
So the structure was strong enough to allow the individuals inside it to evolve without the whole thing falling apart.
One of the great interpreters of the kibbutz, Mukitzer, put it perfectly. He said the pioneers built a structure strong enough to carry the individual as they evolved. It created freedom within mutual responsibility, not freedom from it.
So you were free to grow and change because the structure was holding you, accountable to something bigger than just yourself.
Exactly.
So this whole deep dive really comes back to resolving that initial tension. That feeling of freedom we get from acting alone, it's narrow, it's unstable.
While the functional freedom, the kind that lets you achieve big, impactful things, that requires structure. It requires the hard work of aligning mission, vision, values, and purpose.
There's one last example from the sources that just drives this home perfectly. Henry Ford's assembly line.
Right. Back in 1913, introducing the assembly line required a massive increase in coordination, in structure. It was far more rigid than craft production.
And a lot of workers hated it at first. It felt like a loss of freedom.
It did. But that structural advantage, that increase in complexity and coordination, gave Ford unprecedented capability. And what did he do with it?
He introduced the 5-day, 9-hour work week and doubled the minimum wage.
Doubled it. The rise in organizational complexity directly created more real freedom for the workers, more time, more money, more options for their families.
That's the ultimate paradox. Aligned structure doesn't take away freedom. It creates capability, which in turn gives individuals access to a much wider range of stable, meaningful possibilities.
And that's the final thought for you to take away. Autonomy and structure aren't enemies. They are complementary requirements for any complex system. We really should apply the same scientific precision to designing our communities and our organizations to getting our MVVP right as we do to engineering or physics. Because at the end of the day, the quality of the structure we build determines whether we stay bound to old patterns like those ancient villages or rise to a whole new level of collective capability and true functional freedom.